mentality. And when that country music hits, you know it's time for another hour of sports talk here on Locker Room Buzz. I'm your host, CJ Tully, and some special stuff happening here today with Thanksgiving tomorrow. We got the family on here. Welcome Ryan Tully, my brother, host of the Happy Hour on 91.7 WCUR. Ryan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, CJ. I appreciate you letting me on. How are you doing with this very thankful week coming up?
Yeah, very thankful for a lot of things. I'll get into that in just a bit here with college football. But again, glad to have you on. You host the Happy Hour. How has it been your first year here at second year at WCUR, but your first time hosting the show?
Yeah, obviously I had the show with you where this kind of whole thing for you kicked off. You brought me onto your show, and then having my own show. It's been a pleasure. Obviously, it's not the same without you. Yeah, of course. But it's been good to try and figure out myself and what I want to do as a show. So it has been a little different, but I'm very grateful for the opportunity, and I appreciate you giving me that boost to become, I guess, what I am.
Yeah, of course. You want to give listeners just a plug to when your show is time, what you guys talk about?
Yeah, so my show is Monday nights at 6 to 7.
6-7.
It's called the Happy Hour. We talk mostly just sports. There was a Teacher Talk episode. I will be having another Teacher Talk episode eventually. And then at the end of every show, we have a little positive message, motivation for the week, just because it is the Happy Hour. So we do like to put some motivational stuff out there.
Yeah, so let's get right into it here. This is a sports talk show. Glad to have Ryan on. He'll be talking sports with us all along, especially with the NFL. I know he knows a lot about that there. But let's start off here with our Philadelphia Eagles. They do go into Dallas, and they were up 21-0. It was looking like everything was going perfectly here for the Eagles. And then after those first three drives, after the 21-0 lead, it all fell apart. Birds ended up losing 24-21, burning my parlay. Now, people could say Jalen Hurts was the issue here. You could say it was Vic Fangio, or not Vic Fangio, he is never the problem. You could say it's on Kevin Patullo. You could say it's Saquon Barkley. Lots of things, lots of people you can blame. Now, Jalen Hurts statistically never usually has a great game, but in this game, that's not what you saw. You saw Jalen Hurts go 27 for 39, 289 yards with a touchdown. He also rushed for 2 touchdowns, as one was taken back there from A.J. Brown. But I don't think this was a horrible Jalen Hurts game. Yes, the Eagles played horrible. But my biggest thing here is looking at A.J. Brown, 110 yards and a touchdown. Devontae Smith, 89 yards. He did not get in the end zone. So the receivers were able to find the ball, but there's never been that bounce. And we're seeing that here with Saquon Barkley. 10 carries for just 22 yards. On the season now, 684 yards. That is now 14th in the league with just 4 touchdowns on the season. So last year we didn't see him really get in the end zone. We know the tush-push kind of mitigates any kind of him getting in the end zone. Now, we've seen this with a lot of teams with the backup running backs coming in, so touchdowns for a starting running back aren't really a thing that we see much anymore. But I do think Saquon Barkley and his lackluster play this year, his fall off tremendously from last season, has really damaged the Eagles, and I think this all comes back to the offensive line. I mean, last year this line was phenomenal. You saw what Mekhi Becton was able to do to help out this team. I've heard he's not doing the best this season for his new squad, but Lane Johnson going out hurt, you're not seeing the best play from Cam Jurgens. And then you see Fred Johnson filling in here, and every play is a penalty on him where he's letting somebody get by, he's getting burnt. So I think you can start to wonder now if Saquon Barkley was the product of a great offensive line, because when you looked at him with the Giants, you saw this where he wasn't getting the holes, he wasn't getting those big runs, and he was kind of getting pushed back to the line of great running backs. You brought him in last year with a great offensive line. He was getting those big runs, 30, 40, 50 yards. This year he's not having that. I mean, you're bringing in Tank Bigsby as the big explosive guy. He's coming in here for the 8, 10-yard rushes. You're not seeing that with Saquon. I know there was a video that came out. Saquon had this huge hole he could have gone through, goes to the outside. So it just seems like he's not really finding where he needs to be on the field. Ryan, I want to get your takes on this. Is Saquon Barkley truly falling off here?
I don't know if it's necessarily a fall off. I do agree with your point on it looks really bad from the perspective of the offensive line is weaker this year and he's producing less. I don't think it's that he's bad. I think he looks very unsure of himself, and I don't know if that's because defenses are looking at him differently this year. Obviously, when you put up a 2,000-yard season, defenses are going to look at you completely different. And it just he seems so unsure of himself. He'll get the ball in the backfield, and he tries to do too much off the rip. And I think that's where we're not seeing what it was last year. Last year, he would hit the hole and then do his move. And I think this year, he does have less time in the backfield to find the hole. But I do think that he is kind of overthinking it. Like you said with the Tank Bigsby point, Tank Bigsby just gets the ball and just goes. He just busts through the line. And it's something where, yeah, I don't think Tank Bigsby is better than Saquon Barkley, but I think he's more just I get the ball, I go. Mm-hmm. Whereas Saquon Barkley's trying now to do too much. And I think the lack of pass game that we have been having this year, I think that makes it way more pressured on him. Whereas last year is the run game opened up the pass game. This year, nothing is opening up anything. they're not passing well enough to open up the run game. The run game isn't good enough to open up the pass game, and I think that's the issue you're seeing this year.
Yeah, and that's something we've seen with the Eagles a lot. Is it's either you're very one-dimensional. It's either you're running the ball last year, you can't get the offense going passing, and now everybody wanted this year the offense to get going passing, and now you're not seeing the run game get able to go. And now that's when players can lock down on these receivers, and that's where you're seeing less performance from Devontae Smith. You're seeing A.J. Brown get the ball a lot more, but then it starts to question, are you just force-feeding A.J. Brown? And is that taking away from all the things that you get with Devontae Smith and how he can go up for those 50-50 balls, how he works the middle of the field? And even last week, you didn't see much of Dallas Goedert, and I know he's getting older, but he's been old reliable there, and he's been somebody that Jalen Hurts has been able to rely on. And if you're just forcing it to A.J. Brown, I don't think that's the way to go about it. You saw that more 2 weeks ago with him just forcing it to A.J. Brown on that first drive of the game. Now you're starting to see them divvy it up a little bit more. Again, Devontae Smith going for 89 yards, but I'm just curious what this offense wants their identity to be. I feel like going forward, this team has to be more of a defensive-minded team. I'd like to see maybe you're going to have to trade A.J. Brown out of there just to free up some space to get this defense to lock in, because I'd rather have a Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Cooper DeJean, lock down this young core of defense that you have, and maybe you don't need all this explosive offense. Just go back to winning close-knit games where you don't have to have the explosive plays, because I don't think there's a dominant team in the league right now to where you have to match that. If you can play your brand of ball, that seems to be the way a lot of teams are winning right now.
Yeah, I don't agree with you on the fact that we should just trade A.J. Brown. I do believe if A.J. Brown was getting, and this is very controversial, but was getting the same amount of targets and getting the same amount of snaps and all as top receivers like Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, he would be in that category of the number one receiver in the NFL. So I don't think it's just like trade him away. I do think that he's becoming a locker room problem where now it might be that you have to get rid of him, not because of his need for the ball, because I do think you look at the games, when he gets the ball, he is just ripping it out of defenders' hands. He just is a physical guy. He gets the ball. I don't think any other receiver in the league is necessarily as good as him. He only had, yes, they were forcing on the ball, but he had 8 catches for 110 yards and he had 2 balls where he didn't catch it. So to me, it's not like it's bad forcing. The other day it was
2 weeks ago it was
really bad.
But my point is more, yes, you could say that A.J. Brown is great and that he is one of the top receivers on any other team, but he is on the Eagles, and we know how the Eagles work. And if it comes down to Jalen Hurts or A.J. Brown, I think they're going to be much quicker to pull the trigger on an A.J. Brown than they ever would with Jalen Hurts. I've been saying this now for a week or two. I don't see Jalen Hurts going anywhere else. I think he is a very Eagles-centric quarterback, and I don't think they'd ever put him in a backup role. I don't know if they would bring somebody in to try and push him to be better. I think Tanner McKee kind of gave him his run for his money this year because a lot of people were pushing for McKee. But I just think if it comes down to something needs to change, kind of like what we're seeing with the Phillies, where you just want something to change because you keep running back the same thing. Yes, we just won the Super Bowl, but you're seeing the mentality change as well. And that all started at the beginning of the season where Nick Sirianni says they don't want them out for the banner dropping. And I think there was just too much pressure on what this team had to be coming off the Super Bowl. There was all the drama that still followed it. And I think this team just needs their identity. They need to feel more city-centric, more of a community, more of a team. And I don't think this team feels like a team right now. It's very, Saquon is the lead rusher last year. A.J. Brown needs the ball. Jalen Hurts is stoic and quiet. There's very separating pieces. It doesn't feel like a team necessarily.
I completely agree with that point. I don't even think it's the team. The defense to me is very, we are the defense. Alive. We are the defense. We work together. I can do my job, you do your job, like that. They seem like a family like that. We work together. This offense is, I want the ball. I want the ball. I want the ball. And maybe you're not even seeing it necessarily from Smith and Goddard speaking up about not getting the ball, but you can just see it within the games. Is one guy is the only one getting the ball. Earlier in the season, you had Dallas Goedert being the main guy to get the ball, and it's frustrating to see when you have so many pieces, but it's only one of them is getting to see the ball. And you even saw that last year. Saquon carried most of the team, and if the offense with so many pieces, you need to be more team-centric, and you get the ball, you get the ball, you get the ball. And, those are the games, look at the Super Bowl. Everyone was doing their part.
I think this Eagles team would be much better, especially receiving-wise, but if they had 2 or 3 number 2 receivers rather than having a number 1 guy. I think having a number 1 guy on this team doesn't make sense with the way that you want to play. I think if you had a Devontae Smith, Jahan Dotson, and you spread the ball out that way, maybe you bring in, I don't know, a Naylor from the Vikings, just somebody like that who has the ability to be a number 1 but isn't a superstar. I think that's how this offense would work better rather than having a guy they need to get the ball to because they don't have a game plan for that guy. It's very depending on the day, who's going to get the ball, depending on the play, who's going to get the ball. It's not, we're going to feed you because you are a superstar.
Yeah, I agree. I think you look at the top teams in the league, like, yes, the Bengals have Chase and Higgins, but Higgins isn't a top 10 receiver. Like, you have on the Eagles, you have 2 top 12 receivers.
Devontae Smith is a Heisman. A lot of people forget that part. He came out of college as a Heisman.
People
very rare for a wide receiver.
Yeah, he gets a lot of
small wide receiver. He comes in here, and he would be a number one on the majority of any other team. He could be a superstar. You put him on like Carolina. That guy is a number one wide receiver. You put him on the Vikings, and if you didn't have Jefferson, like this guy could be made something somewhere else, and he's kind of just pushed to the back here. And I don't think he's the one even coming out ever. He had the problem like 2 years ago, I believe he came out, or early last year, but he's not the one crying about anything here. It's AJ Brown, and I don't think you can have two guys like an AJ Brown is a prima donna. Now you look at like a DK Metcalf, same kind of thing. These players need the ball when they need it, or they're going to have a problem. And I'm surprised with how CeeDee Lamb's doing right now with having Pickens on his team, because those are two guys who I thought would be begging for the ball constantly as well. But I'm just not sure what the Eagles can do going forward. They're going to be taking on the Bears this Friday, and this is going to be a tight game here for the Eagles. I'm going to get into the Bears in just a bit later in the show, but this Bears team is squeaking out close victories, and this Eagles team not being able to put up a great offensive performance. I think this game's going to be another close one. I think this could be another late game where the Eagles just fall apart.
Yeah, I also think that the Bears, yes, I believe they're 8-3, and they're at the top of the NFC North. This is a big game for them as well because, you're 8-3. You've barely beat some pretty bad teams, and I believe they had a bad loss to a bad team earlier in the year too. So when you look at it that way, like, this isn't just like it's two good teams against each other. It's two teams that are hungry to prove that they are a top dog in their division and in the league because, like you said earlier, there is not I think there's one clear team at the top, and I think everyone else is kind of fighting for, like, who could be the second. And I think this game is very important for both the Bears and the Eagles to be like, hey, we are here. Like, we know what we're doing. And I think the Eagles have to come out strong in this one, and it can't be a squeak-out win.
Yeah, the Bears actually stomped the Ravens actually stomped the Bears earlier this season. The Ravens, we know, they have not been playing great football this year, but yeah, like you said, this is a big game for both teams. You're going to be looking for seeding-wise. It looks like the Bears do have a chance to win the North here, and then you look at the Eagles, and yes, they kind of have the division on lock, but do you really want to have to go on the road with this team and try and figure something out? This is a team that heavily has relied on home field advantage throughout the playoffs since 2017 especially, and I think that when you look forward at this game is going to be a determining factor here. Yes, the Eagles have beat the Bucs on the road. They beat the Rams. They beat, who are some other big teams they beat? The Lions. They beat the Packers on the road. Like, if you told a lot of people that these are the teams, and the Chiefs on the road, if you told people they're going to beat these teams at the beginning of the season, you would be thrilled because these are the biggest competition that they've had to deal with. You had a fluky loss there to the Broncos where you let up. You just had a fluky loss to the Cowboys where you let up. And then the Giants game, that was just Philly was cursed that night. But those are two games. If you beat the Broncos and the Cowboys, I mean, you're sitting pretty. It's just, and can you even blame the defense in those games? It's more so the offense not able to show up late. And that's seems to be the story time and time again. I'm a big Jalen Hurts defender. I don't think he has ever really been the problem. I think it's more so what they put around him. And I don't think they play football to Jalen Hurts' advantages. And I think that's where, with these constant new coordinators, they try and bring in what they know and what's worked for them in other places. But Jalen Hurts isn't like any other quarterback. You bring him in here, and I think that's why the offense worked so well last year with the rushing game, because that's play action where that's where Jalen Hurts really shows what he can do, and they just haven't really worked towards Jalen Hurts' his workings.
Yeah, I think the options and the play action, the ability to work off Saquon really opened up the game for Jalen Hurts because he is a more mobile quarterback, and he was able to kind of figure out his role as that, hey, I can hand it off, I can run. They used more draws, QB draws. They even did it the other day, and it's like those are plays that work well, and I feel like they're not using them when they need to. They're kind of spacing them out too far to where, like, you're not even giving defenses this, like, look that, hey, maybe we're going to run a QB draw and then running something out of that. It's like we haven't used this in a while. We should probably use that. It's like exactly. It's forced. And like the non-using off the fake tush push, like these are plays you have to bring out more often to throw the defense off. You're becoming so
one-dimensional,
predictable. Like they've been saying that for it was a problem 2 years ago too. The Eagles offense becomes so predictable of what you're going to do to where you then begin to lose the ability to fool defense.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's everything on the Eagles. They'll be playing on Friday, Black Friday, against the Bears. We'll see what happens with that. We come back. Lots to talk about in college football. I have some clips here from my interviews with Tulane's head coach and quarterback, so don't go anywhere. Stay tuned here. 95.3 WCHE. Welcome back to Locker Room Buzz. I'm your host, CJ Tully. Lots to talk about here in college football. We've been seeing this time and time again with this playoff bracket, constantly changing each week. We see different teams being ranked. And, so I was able to go to the Temple football game this weekend. I was able to get press access, so I was able to go down after the game, talk to the head coach and quarterback of Tulane. I have a whole breakdown there of that game, but as always, let's talk some college football. Temple game. Tulane wins this one 37-13. Jake Retzlaff looked pretty good there for Tulane. 17 for 28, 231 yards with 2 touchdowns, including a rushing touchdown. Now, Retzlaff is somebody who really uses his legs, and we didn't really see that much in this game. He only went for about 8 yards on that scramble. But in the post-game press conference, they did mention the fact that Retzlaff was a little banged up, but he came out and said there's November football, and you kind of just have to put your head down, deal with the injuries that everybody else is going to be dealing with, and not use that as an excuse. Something else that was huge in this game was the usage of Jamari McClure for Tulane. Now, he was one of their third or fourth string running backs coming into the season. He fumbled the ball early, and they kind of put him on the back shelf as somebody they weren't using. He came into college more of a track star and not a football player, so they didn't want to utilize him too much. But in the past 2 weeks, he went for 94 yards, and then most recently here against Temple went for 122. He mentioned after the game how blessed he was for this opportunity and that he's not going to let it slide or slip away. Shaz Preston, also a big day for him. He opened the game with a 69-yard touchdown from Jake Retzlaff. He goes for 96 yards on the day. Biggest storyline of this game, though, was Patrick Durkin. He goes 5 for 5 for field goals with a career-long 52-yarder as well. He also makes 2 extra points, accounting for 17 total points here for this Tulane team. Now, Tulane is now 9-2 on the season. They'll play Charlotte on Saturday. They're now tied for the top spot in the American. They're currently placed as the American champion in the bracket. North Texas also 6-1. They'll be playing Temple this week. Tulane 6-1. I said they'll be playing Charlotte. And Navy 6-1. They'll be at Memphis. So Navy having the least likely chance of winning this weekend and making it to that American Conference Championship. But if Tulane is to make the American Conference Championship, they'll be hosting, which would be huge for this program. So looking forward to seeing what Tulane can do. Here is my discussion here with head coach John Summerall.
So I know last week you mentioned you felt more of a bottom 25 team in the league. Do you feel like this week showed you any more confidence?
We might be like the 75th best team in college football right now. I don't know if we're bottom 25 today, but we're not top 25 yet. We're still in the middle of the road.
Yeah, John's got jokes. That was coming off 2 weeks ago where John Summerall comes out and says that he doesn't feel like the team deserved to be ranked. He felt like they were a bottom 25 team. Even though Tulane was projected to be in the playoffs last week, he didn't feel like they deserved it, so I wanted to follow up and see what he thought about this team after picking up a big win against Temple. I then went on to ask Jake Retzlaff what he thought of this team, how they're handling in the locker room, the fact that they could be in the playoffs and that they could be a possible ranked team.
With all the noise about the ranking, the playoffs, how do you guys stay focused in the locker room?
Yeah, it was a big deal for us. Last three American teams, got beat after getting ranked. So that's a big deal. It was something that was talked about on how we gotta just not eat the cheese, right? Not eat the rat poison and keep playing our brand of ball and going out there and doing that thing. And playing for guys like Bryce, it helps us kind of move away from that mindset. We're gonna go play for somebody. We really dig down. This team, the progression of this team is unbelievable, and to see where we are now, how we're playing with a purpose. We're playing with a purpose on both sides of the ball. We're playing better and better each week because of it.
Yeah, you can't eat the cheese there, Jake. But as I mentioned before, this team is looking good. They're looking solid. They're finally finding their identity there in the run game. And Jake Retzlaff coming in here from BYU, he has made a huge impact here on this team. Looking forward to seeing what they can do. And again, blessed for the opportunity. Thank you to everybody who follows along on letstalksports.com. That's TAWKsports.com. And follows all the social media. You guys make opportunities like this possible. So very thankful for that. Now, moving forward, though, we had some other big games this weekend, including Syracuse at Notre Dame. Now, I'm sitting there in the box, and everybody's amazed. This Notre Dame team was up 21-0 before they even had the offense come on the field. They had 2 pick sixes and a punt return touchdown. They end up beating Syracuse 70-11, which is a shame because I had Syracuse to cover the 70 points. Jeremiah Love, though, he has another big day. 8 carries for 171 yards and 3 touchdowns, still making his case for a Heisman. I think he's very underrated. Now, I think he is not necessarily the best running back in college football. Kawan Lacey is definitely up there as well. But I think when it comes to the two of them, they should be in a Heisman conversation because I think they do have a chance of that. C.J. Carr did not have to do much on the day, just 5 for 9, 49 yards with a touchdown pass. That was to Will Pauling, who went 5 straight games with a touchdown, had a break the last 2 weeks, and now comes back with a touchdown reception here. The pick sixes on the day were by Leonard Moore, who had a 46-yard return there, and then Jalen Stroman, a 44-yard pick six return. The punt return was by Luke Tolich, who goes 22 yards on that return. So Notre Dame really starting to state their claim. I know a lot of people have issues with them being in the college football playoff, but it seems like they're going to be in there, and you're just going to have to kind of deal with that. Ryan, I know you have some thoughts on Notre Dame.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of the way they do the playoff rankings and everything. I think it is very it's kind of like they're going to pick the certain teams that they want, and they're going to pick the way they look at it based off of who they want in the playoffs. Because I know last year there was a couple teams that people thought should get in there, but then this year they're saying it's more. You said it was more based off of who you lost to than who you beat, and so beating a bad team by a couple points doesn't mean as much as if you lost to a bad team by 1 point.
More so, it comes down to the argument of Miami and Notre Dame. Notre Dame has the edge on Miami because Notre Dame was able to not Notre Dame. That comes to Texas. Yeah, Notre Dame lost to Texas A&M and Miami, who were both highly ranked when they lost. Meanwhile, Miami, they lost to Louisville and SMU, who were not ranked teams when they lost. So that impacts them more because they lost to unranked teams, more so than Notre Dame losing to 2 highly ranked teams.
Yeah, and when you put it that way, it sounds good. And my issue is just I feel like Notre Dame doesn't play any good teams, and the ones that they do play, they end up losing to it. This was my issue last year with Penn State. Is Penn State played no competition all year long, and when as soon as they played Ohio State, they lost. But they still found a way to make the playoffs because of the extension of the playoffs, which I'm all for the extension of the playoffs, but I feel like it does give a chance for teams like Notre Dame, Penn State, who don't play high competition and then get in because they beat the bad competition. And I won't go on too much, but I think this is kind of the case with Ohio State this year.
That's a fair point. I'm not a big Ohio State guy. I have some thoughts on that we'll get to in just a bit, but a big win here for Oregon. Now, I made a video a few weeks ago saying that I think Oregon could have the best resume when it comes to college football this season. Now, a lot of people were trying to tell me, but they lost to Indiana head-to-head, or they wouldn't beat Ohio State. That's not the resume, though. Resume is who you've beaten. Yes, they lost to Indiana, so they might not be better than Indiana, but when you look at the teams they have beaten, I think they've played the biggest competition in the Big Ten. Now, they did pick up a huge victory here at home, 42-27 over USC. Dante Moore has been phenomenal this season. He went 22 for 30 in this game, 257 yards with 2 touchdowns and an interception. But the biggest thing to keep an eye on here with this Oregon team is Noah Whittington, Jordan Davison, and Dariel Hill Jr. I'm still not sure how to say his first name. Everyone says it differently on broadcast, but 19 carries for Whittington, 104 yards. Jordan Davison, 50 yards. And this team just finds ways to win, and I love everything about it. They have a very lethal backfield, and the head coach of Oregon came out and said that he thought that this is not what this team would be. They figured they would have to win any way possible, but he didn't necessarily think it would come down to the ground game. But, I mean, they have a very deep backfield. They don't even use Mekhi Hughes, my boy, who came over from Tulane. So that just says a lot about this team. Now, USC had a big day as well. Jaden Maeva, 306 yards, 3 touchdowns with 2 interceptions. King Miller on the ground, just 30 yards. But Tanuk Hines, a wide receiver, 141 yards, and Jacoby Lane, 108 yards through the air as well. He also had Mekhi Lemon, 34 yards, 2 touchdowns, and he threw for a touchdown pass of 24 yards. So big game there for both teams. If USC was able to pick up this upset win, they would have had a likely chance to make the playoffs, but now Oregon slots themselves up. They moved to the 6th spot from the 7th spot in the college football ranking right now, so big win there for Oregon. You also had Missouri head to Oklahoma, and Oklahoma was on upset watch as possibly getting bounced from the playoffs. If they were to lose to Missouri, they went 17-6. Now, John Mateer has been the storyline here for Oklahoma all year long. He goes out hurt after having a tremendous start to the season, very high for Heisman probability. Comes out with the injury. He goes 173 yards through the air in this one with 2 touchdowns. He also rushes for 60 yards, which is big if you know what John Mateer is up to, because he was being very hesitant the last few weeks after coming back from that injury. He wasn't rushing as much. You weren't seeing him use his legs. Now he comes out here in a must-win game, and he does so. Love to see that there for him. The defense also had 2 interceptions, and they held one of the best running backs in the country, Ahmad Hardy, to just 17 carries for 57 yards. So this Oklahoma defense is going to be how they have to win. They have found their identity. It's just how far can that take you? I mean, they beat Alabama with the exact same mindset, but they need short fieldage situations, and they need the defense to make plays. This is not a team that's going to go from their own 10-yard line and march down the field. This is a team that's going to need some early setups there. They're going to need to be starting at their own 50, 40. So it's going to come down to special teams and defense, but I'm excited to see what Oklahoma can do. Biggest upset here of the weekend. Pitt goes on the road to Georgia Tech. They win 42-28. Mason Heinschel goes 20 for 27, 226 yards with a touchdown for Pitt. I think the biggest thing to take away from this is their ground game got going. They have one of the best rushing defenses, but you hadn't seen them really get it going from the ground attack. They have Ja'Carrion Turner. He goes 21 carries for 200 yards and a touchdown. They also had 2 interceptions, one by Braylon Lovelace. He goes 100 yards to take it back to the house. And then Kavion Baines Marquez. I know you have something here on Georgia Tech.
Yeah, I had a nice little parlay in there, and the only game I was stressing was earlier in the day. That one won, and I was like, wow, so I get to go and just enjoy my night and not have to worry about college football. And I sit there and I look at the TV, and they were down 30 points at one point. And
they cut it within 7 pretty late, and then Pitt just took off.
Yeah, well, cutting it within 7 and then still losing by, I think, 20 was the final score.
42-28.
Yeah, so I don't know what that was all about. I was excited for Georgia Tech because I was like, oh, this one's a lock. And I'm tired of my locks being the one leg that doesn't hit for my parlays.
Yeah, Haynes King has been the guy. It's kind of, if he's going, Georgia Tech's going. You had a solid day here. 257 yards in the air, 2 touchdowns, did throw 2 costly interceptions. I didn't mention one of those being a 100-yard pick 6. He also rushed for 76 yards and a touchdown. So lots of interesting stuff last weekend, but that is nothing compared to what is coming this weekend with rivalry weekend. Last weekend was more so everyone setting themselves up, taking a bye week. This week is where football is going to get good, and we'll have everything going on this weekend. Stay tuned here on 95.3 WCHE, just taking a quick timeout. I'm your host, CJ Tully, and as I mentioned before, rivalry weekend is ahead of us, and we have lots to talk about here. Let's start off with the Friday games, because we're going to have Friday and Saturday full of great football. Actually, you can back it up a little bit further. Thursday night, you're going to have Navy at Memphis. As I mentioned before, that's a big game there going on in the American. If Navy can pick that one up, it's looking like they're going to be a surefire for the or for a conference championship. We'll see if they can win that and get to the playoffs, but big game there Thursday night. But bouncing out here to Friday night, we're going to have Ole Miss at Mississippi State. On paper, you might look at the Egg Bowl and say, hey, Mississippi State sucks. Ole Miss is a surefire playoff team right now. What's going to happen? Why is this game going to be good? Well, the very next morning, Lane Kiffin is going to come out and say if he is staying with Ole Miss or if he's going to be shipping himself to either Florida or LSU. So lots riding on this game here just in that aspect. Because if they lose the Egg Bowl and Lane Kiffin then leaves, that looks really bad on him. And I think he really leaves a lot of these players high and dry. But some of the players to keep an eye on here in this. Trinidad Chambliss, 2,600 yards, 14 touchdowns to just 3 interceptions on the season. I previewed him before when talking about Jeremiah Love, but Kawan Lacey, 1,136 yards on the season with 19 touchdowns. He has been a dog there for Ole Miss. And as I mentioned, Lane Kiffin could be leaving on Saturday. What does that mean for this team? There's a lot of speculation as well that if Lane Kiffin leaves Ole Miss and isn't there with them through the playoffs, their ranking could drop just given the fact that Lane Kiffin is no longer there. Because there's now a rule in the college football playoffs where if you're missing a player or a coach or the committee just doesn't think you're going to be competitive, they have the right to drop you just because of that. So that's something to keep an eye on here with Ole Miss, because if you're Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin's leaving you, do you want him there as part of that championship run? Do you want him to just be a part of that when you're leaving high and dry? That's something to keep an eye on. But with Mississippi State, yes, they're not a great team, but I've preached all season long, this team at home is a whole different animal. Started with that Arizona State game where they upset them. They really knocked Arizona State out of any contention this season. Those cowbells are the most obnoxious thing you could find in a college football game. I mean, I had to turn my volume. I felt like I was getting the stadium pulse. I had to turn down my volume. It was giving me a headache. So that was a big win there for them. They had a close loss at Florida, 23-21. They lost to Texas in overtime at home, and then they lost to Tennessee in overtime. So they are taking some good teams, I guess, great teams coming into the season, and they're taking them to the final bell. And I think that is something to keep an eye on here with this Mississippi State and Ole Miss game. And you're a big fan of Ole Miss, right?
No. Again, this is all because of like bets I've had, but Trinidad Chambliss had me really stressing when they played Florida. But Kewan Lacey, I mean, what a dog. That dude had, I think it was 200-something yards and 4 touchdowns that game. That run game has been great all year. Like, he has been a dog there. There's a game, and this is a team that I'm really looking forward to watching this week, but There's a game where he had only 31 yards, so there is a way to shut him down, and I think that's the way you have to beat this Ole Miss team is by shutting him down.
Yeah, speaking of dogs, though, Georgia's headed to Georgia Tech. That'll be in a neutral site there. Georgia 10-1 on the season. Georgia Tech 9-2. Pretty much eliminated themselves from any playoff contention last week when falling to Pitt. Gunnar Stockton, 2,400 yards, 19 touchdowns to just 4 interceptions on the season. Georgia's had some big wins this season. They beat Ole Miss 43-35, Florida 24-20, at Mississippi State 41-21, and that was the game that flipped the switch for me that this team is for real. I went into that game making a video saying how Georgia was only squeaking out close wins to not the greatest of competition. They go into a tough environment and they stomped them by 20 points. This is when I knew the dogs were for real. They followed up with a 35-10 win over Texas, went for an onside kick. I mean, they pulled out all the stops to make sure they won this one. And I think that this Georgia team has a real shot to make the playoffs, or they're going to make the playoffs, real shot to make a championship run. That's with the help of Nate Frazier with 700 yards on the ground. Zachariah Branch not even having his best season with 638 yards and 3 touchdowns. Now, again, I said before with Georgia Tech, the biggest thing with them is Haynes King. If he's going, this team is going. 2,500 yards and 12 touchdowns through the air with 800, almost 900 yards rushing with 15 touchdowns. So can Georgia Tech upset? Absolutely. They did it last year. It really put a wrench there in the Georgia team going into the playoffs. And I think it knocked Carson Beck out of the playoff contention as well. That's when Gunnar Stockton had to step up and play there for them. But Ryan, how you feeling about these dogs?
Yeah, this is the team I was talking about. They held Kejuan Lacey to only 31 yards on 12 rushes. So this defense has let up a lot of points against like better competition, but they're squeaking out these wins. You talk about the win against Texas. That's when I kind of switched from my Ohio State bias of winning the championship to, hey, these dogs look legit. The way that they had such a slow start and they came out of the halftime, just scored a touchdown, get the onside kick, score another touchdown, and just kind of put that game away just right out of the half. To me, that was showing like a dominant Kirby Smart, like, hey, we're not playing around anymore. Like, let's go get this win. And they had another big win, like you said, against Ole Miss, beat Tennessee when they were looking good earlier in the year, and the one loss is to Alabama. It was a 24-21 loss. So
at home,
which isn't a good look.
They had not lost at home in years before that.
But to come back and still put up big wins against big ranked competition, to me, they have the best resume. Even your only loss is a 3-point loss. To me, I still think this Georgia Dog team's legit. I think they're going to stomp Georgia Tech just because I don't have any faith in this Haynes King guy after what I watched the last couple weeks with him.
All right, going on to my team to win the national championship for a majority of the season. If anybody's followed, I've gotten a lot of slack for that as well. But Texas A&M, 11-0 right now. They will take on Texas, who has fallen to 8-3 on the season. Marcel Reed, 2,700 yards, 25 touchdowns to 8 interceptions. Also rushed for nearly 400 yards with 6 touchdowns. Reuben Owens II, he has been a very underlying key factor here for this team. They went without their starting running back, Le'Veon Moss, for a majority of the season. He got hurt, so Reuben Owens had to step up. Already 570 yards and 5 touchdowns on the season. I believe Moss has been out now for 6-7 weeks now. So that's been the big thing there for Reuben Owens to step up. At wide receiver, Casey Concepcion, 829 yards, 9 touchdowns. And Mario Craver, his lethal weapon alongside him, 781 yards and 4 touchdowns. They had that very, very close win there, bounce-back win against South Carolina at home. A lot of people wanted to hold that against them, but to go into a second half, you allow no points to a South Carolina offense, still an SEC school where they have the ability to put up points when need be. And then you go out here and you score 28 of your own points. I mean, this team showed up in a big way, and I think that this still shows a lot of fight, determination, and grit from a squad. So I love that win. Yes, it wasn't the prettiest first half, but overall, they got the win, and they did it in comeback fashion. Love that they're still ranked at number 3 right now. The other side of things, Arch Manning, he had back-to-back 300-yard games. Then he goes in and plays Georgia, and that kind of fumbles the entire season there for Texas. On the season, though, Arch Manning, 2,700 yards, 23 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. So not horrible, but a lot going into the season about what he could be, and it just hasn't turned out that way. How do you feel about Texas A&M?
Yeah, I think that the win to South Carolina, to me, it should have dropped them a little bit. I get they came back from the adversity, they won the football game, but then you look at teams like, and I'll put this out there, Ohio State, who stomps bad competition and gets flack for it. But when you barely beat bad competition, I think that should hurt you.
It's the fashion that they won.
Lenora Sellers has looked horrible all year long, and the South Carolina team was supposed to be a top dog in the SEC, and they're not even competing for a championship game, let alone getting near the playoffs. So to me, that should have hurt them a little bit. I still think Texas A&M looks legit. That second half was more like reminiscent of what they can do, but I still think that should have hurt them a little bit. I do think going forward, though, they are one of these top dogs in the college football realm, and they are probably going to win this game. And I believe that they're also in line for a championship game.
Texas A&M?
Yes.
Yeah, if they win, they're definitely in. If they lose, it's going to come down to between them, Alabama, and Georgia. Given Alabama and Georgia win, they'd all be in there at 11-1. So we'll see how that falls. Obviously, I think Alabama would have the edge over Georgia just given that. So I think Georgia would need to lose, Alabama win, and Texas A&M lose for Georgia to have a chance. So we'll see how that all plays out. But moving on to Saturday, you've been talking a lot about the Buckeyes here. Ohio State 11-0, headed to Michigan in Ann Arbor. 9-2 squad, 7-1 in the Big Ten is Michigan. And this game has a lot of playoff standing in it. Now, that hasn't been said by anybody, but I think on the outside looking in, Michigan currently ranked number 15. If they go in and they upset Ohio State, that's the biggest win for any school this year. That's the number one team all season long. And if Michigan's able to go in there and beat them, that is a huge statement. If anybody saw the game last year and years previous, I mean, Michigan's won this game since 2019. They play every single year, but Michigan, they stomped Ohio State. They put the flag on the field. There was a huge fight after the game. Rivalry weekend is amazing, and we'll get to where we'll be this upcoming weekend, but looking forward to this game. This is going to be huge. Julian Sayin, 2,800 yards, 27 touchdowns with 4 interceptions. He's looking like a favorite for the Heisman. I think a lot of that's going to come down to how he plays against Michigan and then how he would play in the Big Ten championship. I'm also curious to see if Michigan upsets Ohio State, if Michigan has a chance to be in the Big Ten championship game, because that would make them a surefire if they're able to win that. And then it gets interesting because you have Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, Oregon, all in the playoffs from the Big Ten, because I don't think anybody wants to see that many Big Ten teams. It really comes down to the SEC and all the fight for them. They haven't gotten too much of a run game going. This is something we saw with Alabama as well, as they haven't really gotten their run game going. But Ohio State with Bo Jackson, 835 yards to just 5 touchdowns. Jeremiah Smith, 902 yards, 10 touchdowns. He's been sat the last few weeks. Same with Cornell Tate, 711 yards, 7 touchdowns. They're kind of using these bummy teams as bye weeks for themselves, so, a little cocky, but we'll see how that plays out for them. Bryce Underwood, 2,100 yards, 9 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. He has not had himself a great year, but the run attack is really where they've made their money. They had Justice Hayes, he going out early this season, still has not come back, 857 yards with 10 touchdowns. That was just in the first half of the season, so you needed somebody to step up. That was Jordan Marshall, 871 yards this season now with 10 touchdowns himself. So Michigan has won this game, as I said, since 2019. We'll see what happens here, but I'm very, very excited to see what happens.
Yeah, if you remember last year, everyone was calling for Ryan Day's head after the loss to Michigan last year, and that just kind of sparked that national title run for Ohio State. So to me, I think the rivalry weekend is always exciting. Like you said, the big fight on the field last year. I think Ohio State has to win this game because they have not played any competition, and so you have to win this game to prove that you are the 1 seed, because your only ranked game was week 1. You squeaked out a nice win against Texas, but you have not played any competition since.
Yeah, moving on now, we're going to have Miami at Pitt in a huge ACC matchup, as nobody wants to win this conference. Pat Summerall came out 2 weeks ago now when they played Notre Dame, not Pat Summerall, the Pitt head coach came out and said, you know what? We don't need this game against Notre Dame. We just have to win our next 2 games here in the ACC. They got that stomping of Georgia Tech. They now go in here and it's, okay, let's see what we can do against Miami. Miami is still very, very interesting when it comes to this playoff picture. Currently slotted in at number 11, but they have no real shot at the ACC championship, so that's when it comes to the head-to-head against Notre Dame and how that's going to work out. But Pitt has a likely shot here. 6-1 in conference play, 8-3 on the season. Carson Beck, 2,800 yards, 22 touchdowns with 9 interceptions. 4 of those coming in that Louisville game, and I think that's where you can look at, okay, so their best player didn't play great in a game where they should have stomped somebody. So that's where it again comes back to how did they play in that game, what cost them, and they lost on an interception there late to Louisville, so we'll see how that works out for them. Mason Heinschel, he shows up this year. He was not the starting quarterback to start the season. He comes in. He was undefeated up until that Notre Dame game. He has 1,800 yards this season with 14 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. Anything there?
Yeah, I remember watching the end of that Miami game and just being like appalled that a 2 seed could even be that close to such an unranked team. And that's where the whole idea of like the 25, like the bottom teams also being like the top 25 ranked, came into play for me, because like that game kind of changed that opinion for me, because Louisville just jumped to being a ranked team after that. But I do think this is a really weird conference with how everyone is just losing.
This was supposed to be Clemson's conference. Yeah. Clemson got bounced so early from it.
Yeah, because of their horrible start. So it's just been very weird. It's like a who wants it the least, I guess, is like you're just throwing games. But Pitt looked really good last week, and they started off pretty well against Notre Dame and then completely fell apart. So I could see Pitt winning this one and upsetting a Miami team that had high expectations.
Yeah, moving on now, Oregon at Washington. Again, this is another game where you look at it on paper, and Washington might not look great, but they have been winning at home. They lost to Ohio State. That was the first time in years that they lost at home. So we'll see what Oregon can do. Not much more to add here. I mentioned before how lethal this running attack is. So we'll see how they play. You're going to have LSU 7-4 at Oklahoma. Another big game for Oklahoma. If they can take care of business here, I believe they're favored by 10.5. This would be an easy slot in there for Oklahoma to make the playoffs. Now, there's still going to be conversation as to whether or not they deserve it and if they can get bounced, depending on what happens with BYU, Texas Tech. I mean, there's a lot of scenarios where teams could still slot their way in because they're like, all right, let's just get right into that. Texas Tech is currently slotted right now as the number 5 team. They are a great team. Everybody knows that. But if they go to the conference championship against BYU and BYU beats them, BYU would get the Big 12 slot. But Texas Tech is still so highly ranked that I don't think a conference championship loss will impact them to bounce them out. And the conference people have come out and said that themselves, that they don't want a conference championship to hurt a great team. So that would be 2 Big 12 teams that have to make it in there. So Miami's case would kind of be out the door. There's still so much that can happen, and it sounds like I talk in circles every week because, I don't know, people might not understand how everything works. So I'm trying to break that down. You can check me out on LRBuzz_pod. I break down everything there every week, so you can check that out. But lots can still happen here. With this LSU team, though, going back to Oklahoma LSU, Garrett Nussmeier, he was a favorite there for the Heisman. Just 1,900 yards, 12 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. He has fallen off, so lots of things that just went completely backwards this season. You look at a Drew Aller, Lenora Sellers, Kate Klubnik, Garrett Nussmeier. These are guys who are all up to be the top first-round picks here and coming up the NFL draft. They've just not panned out well. To a matchup I know Ryan's really excited for, Alabama at Auburn. We all know Auburn wins a football game, so lots going on here with this game. Ty Simpson, 2,900 yards, 22 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. Jackson Arnold right now for Auburn, 1,300 yards, 6 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. So not the best season for him, but Alabama, no real run game. So if Auburn can stop that, this would be interesting if Alabama loses to give them their 3rd loss. Alabama might not make the playoffs.
Yeah, in that Oklahoma game, Alabama's offense looked very stagnant. Obviously, they ended up losing that one. And Auburn, everyone talks about this is like their Super Bowl. So for Auburn, they practice all year long just to beat Alabama, be the spoiler. And there's even more this year for that because of how close Alabama is to being on the way out. Auburn wants to win, knock this rival out, and win the Iron Bowl, especially with it being at home in Auburn.
Yeah, and we'll get to this one real quickly before we head to our next time out. We will be at the Clemson and South Carolina game. Clemson 6-5, South Carolina 4-7. This is going to be an interesting matchup. It's a rivalry. They haven't played to their expectation, but it's one last game here for Cade, one last game here for Lenoris possibly. Lenoris, 2,000 yards, 11 touchdowns, 6 interceptions on the season. On the other side, Cade Klubnik, 2,400 yards, 16 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. He was my Heisman projected from the start of the year. That fell off. Clemson was my projected champion. That fell off. So, some early ball, it just shows that those preseason rankings mean absolutely nothing, and they shouldn't factor for anything as well. Adam Randall was an interesting storyline coming into the season. He was a wide receiver turned running back. So this was going to be something that Clemson was really trying out. He only tried it out really in the playoffs last year. He's had 677 yards and 8 touchdowns. So count that for what you will if you count that as successful for a wide receiver turned running back. Lead receiver here for the South Carolina boys is Nike Harbor. I believe he's a local kid, actually. 503 yards and 5 touchdowns. And then Verdarius Jacobs, some of these guys' names, 407 yards and 3 touchdowns for him for South Carolina as well. You excited for this weekend?
Yeah, I'm very excited, especially. I was more excited when this game was supposed to mean something and be a big thing for both the ACC and the SEC. And with the downfall of that, it makes it a little less exciting, but I'm still excited. It's going to be a great weekend getting to be with the family in South Carolina.
Yeah, stay tuned for a lot of content there. We'll be down in South Carolina starting tomorrow. We'll be there through Sunday, so stay tuned for all of that. Lots coming from the tailgate. I don't know if anyone from South Carolina is listening, but lots of merch given out as well. So stay tuned for all of that. When we come back from this quick break, we'll have lots to talk about with the NFL. Stay tuned here on WCHE. And welcome back to Locker Room Buzz. I'm your host, CJ Tully. As always, that's the big dopamine hit here to finish out the show. Lots to talk about here in the NFL before we get out and enjoy our Thanksgiving, fill our tummies with a lot of food. So let's start here. I want to talk about some main key factors here that I noticed over the weekend that I think lead to a bigger storyline. Starting off here, I mentioned we get to the Bears. The Bears, they continue to find ways to win. They beat the Raiders 25-24. Commanders 25-24. Saints 26-14. Bengals, that insane game, they won 47-42. Giants 24-20. Vikings 19-17. And Steelers most recently 31-28. So all very close games. What do you make of this Bears team? I think they are legit.
I think their defense looks pretty good this year, and I think Caleb Williams has really taken that step from a college quarterback to an NFL quarterback, and I think it really helps having a college playbook mindset head coach with Ben Johnson calling the plays, because I think that really works with this Bears offense. The one thing that I do worry about is the resume isn't great, and I know that doesn't matter in the NFL, but the teams they're beating are not necessarily good teams, and their losses are against the good teams. So to me, it is a little worrisome if you are a Bears fan, but they have a chance to make that real stomping point this weekend against the Eagles.
Yeah, we'll see what happens with that. Also, are the Colts reliant on Jonathan Taylor? Now, I wanted to break this down because they only have 3 losses on the season, and I know that this past weekend they had a horrible Jonathan Taylor day, so I wanted to look back and see what the past few losses, was this the case? And yes, it was. In a 27-20 loss to the Rams, Jonathan Taylor had just 17 carries and 76 yards. In the loss to the Steelers, Jonathan Taylor, they lost that one 27-20 as well. Jonathan Taylor, 14 carries, 45 yards. And then this past weekend in the loss to the Chiefs, 23-20, Jonathan Taylor, 16 carries, 58 yards. On the season, though, 1,100 yards, nearly 1,900 yards, or 1,200 yards, and 15 touchdowns on the season. So a great season overall, but it seems like without Jonathan Taylor going, that's how you stop this team.
Yeah, it's really hurting my fantasy team too, but when you do look at it, they do become very reliant on the run game. It's kind of like the Eagles last year where when Saquon Barkley wasn't going, they were looking stagnant, and you can't rely on just the run game because, while for the Colts, it opens up the pass game. So if your run game's not working, your pass game isn't clicking the same. Even with Daniel Jones looking good this year, it does hurt him when he doesn't have the run game clicking.
But then you look back at last year and how Jalen Hurts got so much slack for Saquon Barkley having the big year. And now you look at somebody like a Daniel Jones who got a lot of praise early, and he's played well, yes, but without Jonathan Taylor playing well, hasn't had the big wins. You look at the same thing here with Josh Allen and the Bills. Without James Cook having phenomenal games like this past week where he has 116 yards on 17 carries and a touchdown, he has been a workhorse there for the Bills. And this is me as the Jalen Hurts defender, do enough quarterbacks get the slack for having a great running back?
I agree with that point. I do think Jalen Hurts deserves the slack sometimes, but I do think that Josh Allen gets a lot of I think it's just because he's exciting to watch that he gets a lot of praise for everything he does wrong. But he looks horrible in that game against the Texans, and not enough people are talking about that. Daniel Jones, I think, is a different story just because he's not supposed to be a top quarterback in the NFL. And so if you think of it that way, yeah, they should get more slack. But I don't think Daniel Jones is getting the slack because he's not a top quarterback in the NFL.
That's true. But I think the love was there when they were winning. But I think if you look deeper into it, it might not necessarily be Daniel Jones making that difference, just given the losses coming back so far on Josh.
I agree with that point.
All right, next up, we have J.J. McCarthy is not him. Now, J.J. McCarthy came into the league last year, didn't get to play really because of injury. Comes in this year, he had more injury. Carson Wentz had to pretty much suck it up and play because they needed somebody at quarterback. But I think, I'll get into what J.J. McCarthy is, but I think it gets a bigger point of let Sam Darnold go, let Kirk Cousins go, you let Daniel Jones go, you had him last year. It's You put so much stock. You didn't get Aaron Rodgers this year. You put so much stock in J.J. McCarthy was going to be this guy, and he's really not. And I said this coming out of college with McCarthy. He just handed the ball off to Blake Corum. He was not a passing quarterback. So look, and I broke it down. His 3 years of college football, 2021, 11 games, 516 yards, 5 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Didn't play all that much, just 11 games. 2022, 14 games, 2,700 yards, 22 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. A little bit better. Move to 2023. His last year, the year they won the championship, 15 games, 2,900 yards, 22 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. He was not top 20 in yards or touchdowns that season. So, again, being carried to that championship game with Blake Corum, I was really surprised he got drafted as high as he did, having watched Michigan's run there, because it was so heavily reliant on the run game that I didn't think J.J. McCarthy would have been an NFL quarterback at that. Plus all the love that he was getting coming into the season. He now has 929 yards, 6 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions. Is J.J. McCarthy just not him?
I don't think so at all. And he came out and said when he's on the field, he has his 9 persona. And since saying that, I think he's thrown 6 interceptions in 3 weeks. So I never was high on him. I thought that Carson Wentz, when they benched him, I was like, you're not getting much better when you go to J.J. McCarthy. And I think that's something you see a lot with some of these quarterbacks who are just average in college. They can't pan out in the NFL because they weren't good enough in college. I think that's the case with J.J. McCarthy, and I don't think that this Vikings team has a future with J.J. McCarthy.
Yeah, I'm curious to see if they draft somebody this year. That's going to be quick to pull the trigger, but how long can you go? You were one win away from being the top seed last year in the NFC North, and then the Lions ended up beating you in that final game, but you were right there. And then to take this far a step back to where you're not even going to be in playoff contention, that's a really bad look there for management, and we'll see what happens with the Vikings going forward. Next debate, Dylan Gabriel or Sanders at the helm there for Cleveland. Dylan Gabriel started a lot this year after Joe Flacco. 937 yards, 7 touchdowns, 2 interceptions in 8 games. Shedeur Sanders in his 2 games has 256 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. Now, when you look at their college stats in their final senior year, or junior year there for Shedeur, you could say that Shedeur had the better season. He had 4,100 yards, 37 touchdowns to 10 interceptions in the Big 12. You look at what Dylan Gabriel was able to do there in the Big 10, making that big run, the top seed there, coming into the college football playoffs. 3,800 yards, 30 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. I'm still riding with Dylan Gabriel. I love everything he brings. I think you can work on getting him some more weapons. I love what Judkins has been for that team. But would you take Shedeur Sanders or are you riding with Dylan Gabriel?
I'll be completely honest. I think that they're both not going to be panned out NFL quarterbacks. I don't like the fact that Dylan Gabriel throws the ball left-handed. To me, that just is ugly. And I don't like having left-handed quarterbacks. I think it shifts the whole way you play your offense because of the way they have to roll. All that kind of throws it off. I think maybe it can confuse defenses. But for me, it's the fact that he's a left-handed quarterback, and I think that they're both not good enough, and I'd rather have Shedeur just because of that.
That's an interesting point.
It's not like a statistical.
This came to my head, one of them in Miami.
Yeah.
I could see that.
Go Dylan Gabriel just so you go lefty.
But I could see them panning out in another offense.
Yeah, I really
don't hate this offense, though.
I like their offense. I don't think either of them are built for that offense.
What is that offense? What do you have to
I think you need a quarterback who can move because
J.J. McCarthy. He just handed to Judkins.
No, I think you need a mobile quarterback to be able to shift and get away because their offensive line isn't that great.
Yeah, but they both are pretty mobile. Gabriel not as much, but Shedeur was known to move.
I don't know.
Oh, you were a big Shedeur hater last year.
I despise both. Like I don't like either of them. So
what's your hate on Dylan Gabriel?
Because he's left-handed. And I didn't like Oregon last year.
All right, following up here with the Rams. They might be the team to beat. They might be the most dominant team in the NFL right now, 9-2 on the season, coming off a 34-7 win over the Bucs. Now, the Bucs, on the other hand, have just been depleted by injury. I think they could be a lot better than their record. They've been without Ibuka at times. Mike Evans has hurt my fantasy team being out the majority of the season. You look at Chris Godwin. He's been out a good amount of games now. But Matthew Stafford, 25 for 35 in this game, 273 yards with 3 touchdowns on the season. 2,800 yards, 30 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. I think he's a surefire MVP. And I think that this team is starting to get it rolling.
Yeah, and if you even look at the games that they're winning games against good teams by a lot. They beat the Colts when the Colts were hot. They should have beat the Eagles with that field goal. It got blocked. To me, that does not signify that the Eagles are better than the Rams. That was just a great special teams play. They lost to the 49ers in overtime, so they're like 2 very close games away from being undefeated. And I think that they had 4 interceptions against Sam Darnold when he was rolling. They just stomped the Bucs. And their schedule coming up is easy, too. I think that this is the team to beat. Matthew Stafford has looked great. Puka Nakua's looked great. Even without him, they were still looking good. So, to me, I think this Rams team is going to be a tough one.
Yeah, it should be interesting. We'll see how it all plays out. That will do it here for this episode of Locker Room Buzz. I'm CJ Tully. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Again, follow me on social media at LRBuzz_pod, on X now, not Twitter, at CJTully_LRB, and go to my website at www.letstalksports. That's TAWKsports.com. We'll be at South Carolina this weekend talking the latest in that, giving you guys content from there. Ryan, thanks for joining, and check out his show, The Happy Hour, 6 to 7 on 91.7 WCUR.
Thank you for having me.
All right, I'll catch you guys next time. Have a safe and happy holiday, and don't black out too hard tonight.